On today's episode of Positive Pulse, we will be speaking with Dr. Warren Clark. Now, as you can see from my lovely background here, we are on location in the picturesque parish of St. George at the Gun Hill Signal Station. Today, we will be hosting the Barbershop Talk series, which is a transformative event for men and boys in society to speak on various issues, including men's mental health in a safe and supportive space. My name is Rashid Holder, and this is Positive Pulse. Today we have Dr. Warren Clark, and he's going to tell us all about the Barbershop Talk series. Warren, welcome to Positive Pulse.
Appreciate you. You're spinning me.
Oh.
It's okay.
So tell me all about the Barbershop Talk series. Why was it conceptualized?
It was an accident. It was a beautiful accident, actually. When I first came up, I shouldn't say come up with the idea. I think that in all fairness and respect to all the people who've been doing a Barbershop Talk series before this, I pay homage to them. But in terms of how I was able to facilitate such a conversation with community, and this is community driven. There is no such thing as Dr. Warren Clark or Warren Clark doing this on his own, right? So when this started in 2018, this is a beautiful accident. And what I mean by beautiful accident, I wasn't expecting to get in such a rich conversation with young black men in a barbershop, and I've been doing programming for young people for, more than 20 years, not to outdate myself now, you know what I mean? But I've been doing programming for so many years with black youth in Toronto. And one of the things when you think about the ratio between black young men and black young women in these programs, the ratio is, if not 3 to 1, 4 to 1, right? So I've always asked myself, how do we get involved in doing programs that cater to young black men, particularly those who are impoverished or marginalized, whichever term you prefer, or vulnerable young people. So the concept, like I said, started in 2018 in Ottawa, Canada. I was doing my doctorate at the time, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my doctorate, but to answer your question, I got in a conversation with a young man, youth, about Michael Jordan and LeBron James in terms of who the better basketball player is, right?
Yeah.
And Jordan 3 is on the foot, so you know which way I went, right? And the conversation exploded in a positive way where people were chiming in and they're sharing their insight and who they thought was a better basketball player. And then the conversation shifted. It shifted to sexual health, which is an important conversation to be had among young black men. You know what I mean? We went from condom use, we went to courting women, we went to even how to pick up women. This is not to encourage misogyny among black young men. That's not what we're doing. But if we can cater and encourage young men to be vulnerable in a space where they can share, talk, but receive mentorship, I think we're doing the job, and that's what we were able to do in 2018.
So let me pose this question to you then. Do you think that there are enough conversations being had about men's health in general, mental health, as it impacts young men, young boys in society?
I think there's, and we got to pay homage to people who are doing this type of work, right? And usually those people are outside the academic walls. They're activists, they're community leaders, heck, they're barbers, So these conversations are happening. But in terms of a holistic way of approaching this conversation, I think we can do a better job, right? Like when we talk about mental health specifically, it's intersectional, you know what I mean? Like there's no such thing as a one type of mental health concern.
Correct.
There's being having bipolar as a mental health concern, or drug addiction. Those are mental health concerns. Right, so if that is the case with focusing on mental health, then that should be the case in focusing on black people, based on their social locations, meaning gender, sexuality, age. We should be also considering, but black men specifically, there should be a space to actually carve out those conversations.
No, I'm glad that you mentioned black men specifically, given the prevalence of crime, especially gun crimes being committed here in Barbados, over the last few months, when you look in the papers, we're seeing a specific type of individual, being taken to court and obviously, placed in the law system, be it the penal system where they end up at Her Majesty's. But, what I want to find out from you is, where do we find, the bridge that allows these persons to not end up where they are?
I think we have to think about these conversations that how black men or black boys are not even viewed as boys. They're viewed, particularly in a North American context, as men before they're boys. Here's an example. There was a grade 2 black young man in Ontario who was expelled from school because he got in a fight, right? And expelled doesn't mean expel and come back to school. That means you're done.
Yeah. There's
no more entering the institution. That's grade 2. You know what I mean? We've seen and heard stories of young black men being arrested in grade 1 in Ontario, right? And the reason why I bring this to the forefront is because we have to consider what the social conditions that young black men are going through before they even get to pick up a gun or before they get to go through the criminal justice system, right? There's something, let's focus on the home for example, right? I'm not sure if you heard this concept, but the concept of a non-resident active parent or versus a non-resident active parent. So resident active parent or non-resident active parent. Those are two different concepts that we got to consider pertaining to parenthood, because you can be in the home as a resident in the home as a parent, but you're not actively paying attention to your kids.
Correct.
You know what I mean? And then if you look at the flip side, when you're not in the home and you're actively participating with your kids, you're not there 24/7. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't be there for your kids when you want to. So we have to think about what parenting looks like holistic, and it's not to blame parents out there, but parents are going through things themselves as well.
Correct.
Which compound their ability to actually be participating in their children's lives.
Right. So the Barbershop Talk series then is geared specifically to benefit who?
Black men first. Black men and boys. Right?
Black men and boys.
But the thing is,
specifically.
But it's also geared for the community, and I say that equally because we can't preach to the choir. You know what I mean? I think we have to consider that there's women out there, respectfully, who play roles as mothers, who play roles as sisters, who can add value to the conversation, but most importantly, they can learn from the conversation.
Correct.
So it's twofold, right? And that's why the Barbershop Talk exists the way it does. It's not about just bringing young men into the room. It's about bringing everyone into the room so we can learn from one another, so we can understand what vulnerability of these young men is and actually appreciate and empathize. Okay,
so who's involved in the event in terms of, do you have, guest speakers? Do you have like psychologists that come in and speak to your guests? Obviously to educate them in a way that allows them to now transfer that knowledge into the community and be able to spread that knowledge so that we can get, a better people in society.
Yeah, right. Like we do have, as we call them, panelists, but the conversation should not be just focused on the panelists. I think, and not even focus on me, right? I think we can focus on one another, right? There's someone going to be someone in that chair tonight who's going to be saying something that we should all be paying attention to.
Yeah.
And they may not have a professional title. They may be a mother, they may be a sister, maybe a father, or a brother of that. So I think we all contribute to the conversation. But in terms of how we set up this Barbershop Talk, it's about working in tandem with people who are doing the good work here in Barbados.
Yeah.
Right? For example, Fabian from the Men's Support Network Group. We got Nature from Air Force One as examples. These folks are doing the work day in, day out, right? And I think we got to pay homage to that. But most importantly, everyone's on equal footing here. There's no one above no one. I'm not Dr. Warren Clark. I'm just Warren with the J's.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're another person that is attending.
There you go.
And any person that participates in this event can make a meaningful contribution, whether they are, as you say, part of the panel or a member of the guest
100%.
audience.
100%. And I lean on learning in this moment too. Right.
Okay.
Each one we've done, I always learn something.
So, would you say that more events like this are needed, especially to help the youngsters in society, especially men, get a better understanding of maybe themselves how they can communicate, how they can resolve conflict, so that we can help to obviously reduce the level of crime that we are seeing perpetuated on the island?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, yes, doesn't do justice to what we're trying to achieve. I understand in terms of how do we reduce crime, but how do we appreciate the vulnerabilities of these young men? Let's start there.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not saying you did something wrong, or you said something wrong. I think we have to shift our mentality. We're dealing with human beings, right? And if we know, I'm sure you know your history, and a lot of people are going to be viewing this, right? The idea of blackness or black bodies has always been loathed. It's always been othered, right? Black men has been a delectable, literally looking at the work of Vincent Woodard, who talks about black masculinities and the delectable Negro, the name of his book, right? So we have to think about how do we carve out space, as I mentioned, to not only appreciate black men in a form like this, but in many spaces, particularly in schools, particularly in the other youth type organizations, right? And not to be too long-winded, but to talk about my research really briefly, some of the things that I focused on was youth employment training programs in Canada.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the things that came out of that research was that there was a lot of homogenizing black men, or black youth, right? And not recognizing these black men are impoverished. These black men, most of them don't even have high school education. They're going to these centers looking for employment, but they're not taking the opportunity to understand who they are as human beings.
Yeah.
And that's how we have to start these conversations.
Right. So can you list at least 2 factors that you think play an integral role in, crime being perpetuated, and maybe just to add as an aside to that, the events like the Barbershop Talk series, and do you think they get the level of recognition that they deserve, so that we can have more of this happening, as I say, to stimulate the conversations?
Yeah, I think this conversation, and shout out to my students, they're doing an amazing job, right? I say that shout out not just to be a fanboy here, but I'm trying to be young, you know what I mean? No one laughed at that, anywho. But one of the things that, Kevin and Nathan, respectfully, some of the things my students from the U of M, I've noticed that they're really bringing these young men together, right?
Yeah.
And that's important. So I think we are getting that recognition, rightfully so, right? We've been very fortunate to have, each time we've done it, we've had really good crowds of people coming out.
Yeah.
So I'll stop there, but start to answer your former question in terms of crime. I think we do need to continue conversations like these. It doesn't necessarily need to be the Barbershop Talk series. I think we need to, like I said, carve out space. I'm going to keep repeating that. We need to carve out space to acknowledge that there's black men that need to be acknowledged certain ways in certain spaces. And if we don't, all we're going to be doing is the wheel's just going to repeat itself.
So, Doc, because it's Warren.
Warren's fine.
Yeah, okay. So, how has the Barbershop Talk series impacted participants in terms of, making them more aware, and also keeping them grounded so that they do not end up as, let us say, fodder for society?
I think, good question. I'll echo the word you use, which is awareness, right? A lot of the young men who've been entering these programs, they viewed it as something that they can look forward to, and also attend, but also contribute and also learn at the same time. Its impact, I think I'll answer that question, has been positive. And I don't just say that just to end it there. I think it's positive in the sense that we do have young men that's showing, not only showing how it's impactful by changing certain behaviors, which we've seen, such as drug use. I've had a couple of young men in the past said to me that because of entering this Barbershop Talk, they've been able to put down smoking weed, as an example. I didn't see that as an entry point, but I'm glad that helped, and I don't take no credit for that. I think that it's something that's benefited them, and they've seen the benefit of doing so. In terms of Barbados specifically, I was speaking with Nature the Barber just yesterday, and he's a huge part of this Barbershop Talk series. And he was saying to me, like, one of the guys that who are living that street life, they utilize him as a confidant, which he talks them off the ledge, right? So I think the way in which we've cultivated this program over the years, and working with community and working with people who have already been doing the work, it just expands the message of what we're trying to do, which is support young black men and boys, right? And in doing so, I think we're seeing positive impact, like I mentioned.
So, Warren,
Yeah.
thank you once again for joining us.
No problem. Appreciate it.
The Barbershop Talk series is a space, a safe space, and a supportive space for Black young men in society and boys in society to come and speak about various issues. And I just want to thank you and the entire team for putting this event on. As you said, it's not a one-off. So we do look forward to having more of these series so that we can help to reduce the prevalence of crime and violence, especially amongst our men in society. I'm your host, Rashid Holder, and this has been another episode of Positive Pulse.